Hi, welcome to Miss Richardson's U.S. History 5-Minute Lectures. This information will be U.S. Notes 3.8, Japanese Americans in World War II. It includes information that aligns with the second section on your Unit 3 study guide. Remember, you have control over the lecture, so pause when you need to, write down any questions you have, and re-watch as often as you need. And always be using your study guide to help you take those notes. Let's go ahead and get started. You may have noticed in the last set of notes, I did not talk about the experiences of the Japanese Americans in World War II. This minority group had a unique experience, and their treatment during World War II deserves a lot more time than the 30 seconds they would have received in the other notes. Let's go ahead and talk about them now. After Pearl Harbor was attacked, the Japanese Americans in the U.S. faced extreme prejudice in the U.S. Many Americans feared that Japanese Americans were spies and they would turn on the U.S. This was especially true on the West Coast, where many of the Japanese Americans lived. In 1942, West Coast Japanese Americans were relocated to internment camps. These camps, a result of Executive Order 9066 by Franklin Roosevelt, authorized the relocation of all Japanese Americans from the West Coast to assigned camps throughout the U.S. This was actually considered necessary for the safety of America. We were fearful on the West Coast they could help an invasion, so we moved them inland to less populated areas. Families were actually notified that they would be moved. They packed their belongings, sold whatever they could, locked up their houses, left their friends, their families, their cars, their businesses, and traveled to their new homes. They often had no idea where they'd be moving to, for how long they'd be gone, or any other details. So they might be moving from Southern California to North Dakota, and they would have no idea. Many of the families lived in these camps, some of which were unfinished when they first arrived, forcing them to live in hastily renovated barns and other areas for years. These camps operated until 1945, and even got approval from the Supreme Court in a case where someone challenged the legality of this, and the Supreme Court found on the side of the government. Well, many Japanese Americans lost everything after being gone for so long. They returned and their houses were gone, their businesses were gone. Not one was ever tried for espionage or sabotage during World War II. The U.S. government formally apologized for the internment in 1988 and granted up to $20,000 in compensation to any living American who had suffered under the internment program. While many Japanese Americans spent the war years in these internment camps, others found ways to serve their country. One way to avoid being sent to a camp or to get out once there was to enlist in the military. These Japanese American soldiers were known as the Nisei. Many Nisei served in Europe during the war, while others served as translators in the Pacific. There were also all Japanese battalions, much like those all African American or all Hispanic battalions that we saw. While the experience of Japanese Americans in World War II demonstrates the fear and prejudice that existed here in the U.S., we were definitely not the only country that was dealing with these issues. Fear, hatred, and prejudice in Europe resulted in the Holocaust, the murder of nearly 6 million men, women, and children because one group felt another group was inferior. The lessons learned from World War II helped shape our views in the years following the war. This is the end of U.S. Notes 3.8. Hopefully you learned something, and I will see you tomorrow in class with any questions you have.